Testing here. This one's good. Mm-hmm. Take two. Hmm. You, you want my mic? will it? Will it? Will it reach?
Ah, oh, perfect. And welcome to Kitchen Conversations. I think it's just the energy. Linda and I actually did a rehearsal before, and the mics were fine. And then all of a sudden, poof. But it's all good. I'm glad that you're here wherever you are, be it right now or if it's at a later time. So we have a lot to get into tonight, and it's a big conversation. So let us start with the blessing first. Take a moment to just be still. Wherever you are, still your mind, still your physical beingness, and allow the breath to flow. Allow the breath to move through your body. And every thought that passes, let it go. We are blessing this evening in the absolute awareness of all that is. That we're right on time and we're right where we're supposed to be. Each and every one of us that's online, that's not online, we're right where we are supposed to be. And we've called forth this divine night. We've called it forth. We are ready to receive, to participate, to be about this divine expansion. So we allow our heart to open up even wider, blessing this heart, the heart of God, the heart of love, the heart of well-beingness, the heart that is the symbol that all is well. This heart that is constantly beating, pulsating, expanding. So we just take the breath and we prepare ourselves. As we let that breath go, we breathe into the divine essence that all that there is God. Our hearts are protected. Our thoughts are protected. Our path is protected. For this and so much more, we give thanks and praise. And so it is. You better listen, my sister and brother, 'cause if you do, you'll hear voices that are calling across the air. And they're calling across the ocean, and they're calling across the land, and they will until we all understand that none of us are free. None of us are free. None of us are free. If one of us is in pain, none of us are free. None of us are free. So we just got to step into it tonight. Massacres in the United States. I was blown away with how many massacres there are, despite the nationalities, sometimes sexes, women, children. Our history of massacres must be healed. And of course, the massacres of blacks. So, take a breath with me. In this uncomfortableness, in the darkness of the massacre, there is a light that's shining, and we get to be that light. So tonight I'm going to show you a video. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's really, I think it's important that we see it, that we talk about it. We'll come out of the video, we'll have a little chat, and then we'll do a forgiveness process. I think it's important that as we open ourselves up to see our history, and it is our history. It's not mine or yours, it's ours, and we're all a part of it. So, join me now as we take this journey to Ocoee, the Oconee Massacre.
The Ocoee Massacre, November the 2nd, 1920, the bloodiest day in modern political history. The newspaper at the time labeled it as a race riot. Two black communities in Ocoee, the Southern Baptist and the Northern community, known as the Methodist Quarter, had two very prominent, respected, and prosperous men. Their names, Julius Perry, known as July Perry, and Moses Norman. Each were owners of large tracts of farmland. In the upcoming election, November the 2nd, 1920, had the black community hopeful that they might see John Moses Chaney elected to the Senate. Judge John Moses Chaney began the voter registration campaign for black residents in Orange County. Leaders in his party believed black voters would be loyal to Republicans, since President Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, had freed the slaves. And blacks were registering in record numbers across the South. But in the weeks leading up to the election, members of the KKK warned blacks in the area that they would not be permitted to vote. And on November the 1st, the day before the election, the KKK marched through the black towns, threatening all black people, "You will not vote." This, along with the poll tax, was a voting fee that started in 1890 to keep blacks from voting in the South. Even though they were eligible to vote, they were required to pay the tax. The use of poll taxes for federal elections continued until 1964. And even then, 5 states enforced the tax for state elections until 1966, when the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in. Prior to the poll tax, other measures called black codes were enacted in southern states. The laws were designed to limit black people after slavery was abolished. Julius Perry and Moses Norman worked as activists, encouraging blacks to vote and paying the poll tax for some blacks who could not afford it. In Ocoee, black and white Republican leaders held clinics to show black residents how to register to vote, pay a poll tax, and cast a ballot. The 24th Amendment banned poll taxes in 1962. Despite the threats, a handful of black residents in Ocoee, both men and women, showed up to the polls on election day. In the morning, they cast their ballots without incident, according to 2 accounts. But in the late afternoon, Moses Norman showed up to vote. Election officials told Norman that he hadn't paid his poll tax. And he said, "Yes, I have, sir." But he was turned away, and looking for help, Norman went to Chaney, the white judge, who advised him, try again, he said. But Norman was turned away, saying mysteriously his name wasn't on the voter registration. When word spread about Norman's attempt to vote, a posse of what became a lynch mob was formed under the leadership of Colonel Sam Salisbury, who was the former Orlando police chief at the time. He would later be elected mayor of Ocoee in 1951. By the evening, a white mob had arrived from Orlando. A rumor spread that Norman was hiding out in the home of July Perry, the black landowner, the community leader, in his early 50s who had been involved in voter registration. His house was surrounded by the mob. At some point, 2 white men were shot and killed, perhaps by Perry's teenage daughter, perhaps by one of the white men shooting. There was gunfire flowing everywhere, and then their house went up in a flame. Next, their AME church went up in a flame, where Norman and Perry were trustees, and at least two other dozen homes went up in flames that night. The option were to leave, get shot, or stay and burn. We may never know exactly how many black residents were killed that night. Newspaper accounts said only 6. Witnesses remember many more. One person claimed 2.5 wagon loads of black bodies were dumped in a trench near a lake. That land, hollow ground, there is a mass grave of black people killed November the 2nd, 1920. Amazingly, the Perrys made it out of the house alive. His wife and daughter were taken to a jail in Tampa. Perry, shot in the leg, was taken to a jail in Orlando. Within hours, a lynch mob pulled Perry from his cell and he was brutally killed. His body left hanging in front of Judge Cheney's Orlando home. No one was ever held responsible for any of the deadly violence. The leader of the mob later became the Ocoee mayor. Some people never returned to Ocoee after the massacre, but many did and tried to rebuild, only to be pressured into signing their land away over to white people and being pushed out for good. Perry's family was cheated out of his land. While his wife was still in jail in Tampa, she signed over an executorship to Perry's land to Buford Sims, a Confederate captain and Perry's former employer. After years of litigation, his children received about $100 each for land that was sold for hundreds of thousands. Ocoee was a whites only, they called it sundown town, which meant blacks were not allowed until the 1980s. Black folks in the region never forgot what happened there. In the late 1990s, a local activist group, the Democracy Forum, pressured for town halls to talk about the massacre and to build an exhibit. 15 years later, and 35 miles away, a black teenager named Trayvon Martin was shot to death in Sanford, Florida, sparking the Black Lives Matter movement. This past summer, as the History Center put the final touches on its exhibit, the nation erupted in protest after the killing of another black man, George Floyd. One evening, one of the staff members went to a Black Lives Matter protest in Orlando, where she was surprised to see a young man holding up a sign that read, July Perry, Ocoee, Florida, November the 2nd, 1920. Florida's Judge DeSanto signed an education bill for high school to start teaching the story of the Ocoee Massacre. Let us start learning our history so that we can see the darkness and shine a light on it, so that we may start the forgiveness process for all.
Wow. In doing research for the different massacres, there is a list on our webpage. If you go under Wednesdays, it's quite an extensive list of different massacres that we've had in the United States. It showed me that we have this way of dealing with people, places, and things that we are afraid of, with this mob mentality, with this dangerous fear that will incite a group of people to a place of such frenzy that they will kill children, women, and men, all in the sake of perhaps thinking that they're right. In this case, in the Ocoee Massacre, It was an election day. And you saw one of the oldest lady in there was the daughter of Julius Perry. And as you see her pointing to her arm, she's showing how she was burned in the fire. It was quite amazing because reading the story in detail, and there's quite a few documentaries on YouTube that can take you much deeper into the journey of it. I thought it was so amazing that 1980, 1985, Ocoee at that time just started to allow blacks into the town. I mean, that is not that long ago. So sundown absolutely meant that if you got caught, if you were black, in a sundown town, they could kill you immediately because you were not supposed to be there, being a black person. 1980, 1985. That's not so long ago. I forget that Florida is the South. And when I hear stories like this, it reminds me once again, oh yeah, Florida is the South. So, oh, check. I think maybe it's the cord. I think it's maybe the cord. It went out for a minute. It's all right. It's just a lot of energy moving. So when I was looking at the Ocoee Massacre, the families, it wasn't just that they killed and burned people. It was also that they stole land. Land that the black people that were there had purchased and owned, were farming, where Julius Perry, that they talk about, was a very prosperous man. When they talk about him in detail, he was actually more prosperous than some of the white people there in the town, in Ocoee. And as an activist, he was really invested in helping blacks work together to buy property, to understand the importance of voting, that was your voice to be heard. So he was really active in that. The judge that they talk about is really interesting. And as would have it, the judge, Judge John Moses Chaney, that insisted that Moses Norman go back to the poll and ask again to vote, was running for office. I don't know for sure, but I think he had another agenda because he was running for office. And so, you know, they hung Julius Perry's body outside of his home. To say that you can't come and change things here. He was trying to enroll and register blacks to vote. And I thought, how amazing. It makes sense that more blacks would have been Republicans at that time because Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and he was a Republican. So why would you not want to be with the man that freed the slaves? Because you would think that, okay, he is for us. But the dis-ease that is in a massacre, the dis-ease that is in a mob mentality, is one that we still see today in so many different ways. But it's still there. Just to share a couple of other, I know you know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, that recently came out. And I have to say that I am happy that the governor of Florida, DeSantis, signed a bill that they would now teach the Ocoee Massacre in high schools. Our history, as dark as it can be sometimes, we have to look at it we have to start to recognize that this part of our history, this is an old consciousness that is crying to be shifted, to be released. That a new way of living is possible, but not with old thoughts, not with these old feelings. And one of the main reasons that people don't want to go into the history is that people don't want to feel bad. And there are people that will be angry, and there's no way around that unless you create a different conversation. You know, I was thinking we're going to do a forgiveness process. And initially, when I thought about doing it, I was like, I ain't got nothing to be sorry for. And I was like, ooh, I got to sit with this. Because all of our energy is a part of this. Anytime you've held anger or hatred towards someone or jealousy, it's a part of this consciousness that says that there's not enough. Anytime you felt that there wasn't enough, it's a part of this consciousness. And so looking at our history does not make the history repeat itself. It's the fact that we have not looked at our history honestly and had honest conversations. How can we not repeat this again? Because we're still doing it in 2021. Rosewood, which I was aware of, which is Rosewood, Florida. But once again, I did not learn about this massacre in school. It was a movie. And I actually was like, this can't be real. So in Rosewood, Florida, 1923, Rosewood was a successful black town in Florida, Pine Woods, until it was burned to the ground by a white mob seeking revenge for a supposed assault on a white woman. At least 6 people were killed. You know, that's interesting. It's like 6 is the going number. And they said that they only killed 6 black people in Ocoee during the massacre. The reason it's a massacre, one of them is that it was so bloody, they burned a whole town down. There were a lot of people that did get away, but a lot of people were killed. And so you find in some of these places, they have mass graves where the bodies you don't know who it is. It's hard to find out whom their ancestors are. They're just pushed together in some big dirt pit and covered up. And quite a few of those are actually some lakes that we ride our boats on right now and go skinny dipping in and diving. That's for another kitchen conversations, but it's real. So at least 6 people were killed, perhaps more. Like they always say, perhaps more. Survivors waded through swamps in their night clothes to escape. A 1994 law allowed descendants of Rosewood residents to attend state college tuition free. The first example of legislation in the body of the United States giving back reparations to African Americans. Reparations is talked about a lot, definitely amongst blacks. You know, my mule and my acre of land. So much land and so many things have been stolen from the black families. And their ancestors have never been compensated. In Ocoee, that's prime land that was great farmland. It was hard to get some of the pictures to show, but one of the pictures that I saw was just fields and fields of farmland, of plush green vegetation and fruit trees that Julius Perry owned. And the story goes that his wife being held in jail, Buford Sims, who has a street named after him in Florida, who was a Confederate KKK. And I think this is another part of the healing process, that all of these places with Confederate flags and honoring people that really have been a part of hating people and committing just horrible crimes, that we must make them accountable and not honor them, not giving them streets and statues. And I know for some people that's a little upsetting and unsettling, because they go, well, that statue has been here forever. But that statue represents something that no longer is America. It's not America. It's an America trying to evolve and become what it thought it could be. That was not America. That's not the dream, the home of the brave, the land of the free. That's what we're trying to become. That's the future that's evolving through us. And in order for that to take place, we have to let this old stuff go. Elaine, Arkansas. I did not know about this one. Elaine, Arkansas, 1919. There were dozens of racist attacks and massacres across the country in the Red Summer of 1919. One of the worst was in Elaine, Arkansas, in which at least 200 black farmers and their families were slaughtered. The farmers had recently unionized and were planning to bypass the unfair sharecropping system. That sharecropping system was just another form of slavery. I've shared with you that I found out that my grandparents were sharecroppers. And the whole system of sharecropping is that you were always in the hole. The idea was that you would raise and farm the land, and you would bring forth the crops, and then you would sell it and be able to buy the land just like a mortgage, little by little. But every time the families would bring a crop in, be it cotton or fruit or vegetables, I'm gonna call him a slave owner because that's what they represented, would always say, I know you made $500, but you owe me $697. I guess I'm gonna have to get it next year from you from the other crop. So you never, ever, number one, the property never could you attain. And number two, you were always in the hole. Can you imagine that? You and your kids, some families wouldn't even let their kids go to school because it's this promise, this hope that this will be our land. This will be our patch of freedom. But every year, and the system was built so well that they would allow you to go to the store and get little things from the local store, which of course they had to be paid back. And they were always friends with whomever owned the land. So it was a system that there was no way you could ever get out of that system, not and own that land. It wasn't going to happen. So as my aunt and mom were sharing the story about my grandmother and grandfather, my grandmother was a hellraiser, and she was washing the Miss, I don't remember what the Mrs. names was, but she did the clothes. They had 2 kids at that time, and my grandfather was a brother of 14. And so he had some of his brothers that also worked the land, and I don't remember how many years, but it had been more than 3 or 4 years, and they were always in the hole. Never, ever. Every time it came, the crops come in, it's bountiful, they're thinking, okay, this is the one. Nope, you owe us some more. And so this particular time, my grandmother said to my grandfather, if Massa tells you we owe him some money, you say, yes, sir, all right, yes, sir. But we're getting out of here. We're leaving. Now, understand, you couldn't just leave, because who's going to work the land? This is a system that they found like, hey, this is great. We get to have slaves, work them to death, and keep the land, unless you had somebody that was fair, which was rare. So you couldn't tell them that you were going to leave. They couldn't have any signs of it. Neighbors would let the other masters know, I see your people's running. They'd hunt you down. So this was a really meticulous thing that you had to do. And so, yes, my grandfather went there, and yes, they still owed money. They were still in the hole. My grandmother was completely clear that that was going to be the answer. So she had started to pack up what she could. And I thought this was so interesting because they had a horse and a buggy. But they couldn't attach the horse to the buggy because the horse would make too much noise, or the wagon would make too much noise. So when my grandfather came home, they packed up the wagon as much as they could take. And by that, I mean as much as my grandfather could pull the wagon along, because they couldn't have the noise. And I think I was in my 30s when my mom and aunt shared that story. Both my grandmother and grandfather, I think, had made their transition by then, because I was full of questions. They had never talked about it. And that's one of the things that black families used to share the stories. Reading the story of Ocoee, listening to some of the descendants that their great-grandparents that were made it out alive, they were just so completely shaken and just beat down that they couldn't talk about it. That the actual idea of talking about it, one of the men describes his grandfather. He said, as a kid, he remembered his grandfather being this really happy man with this big smile all the time. But after Ocoee, there was no smile there. There was no joy, no happiness. I'm happy to say my grandmother and grandfather made it to Memphis. I guess that's a plus. They made it to Memphis and then eventually to St. Louis. It was interesting because some of the descendants from Ocoee wanted to find out if there were any kind of reparations that could be given to their descendants. As you heard in there, for the land that was stolen, that was taken, some of them only got $5 for their land. And we're talking acres of land. They just took it. Just took it. They came back after everything had kind of died down to try to go back into their homes. And the white people of the town were like, no, this is ours. They took the land, gave them $5, go on your way. The Julius Perry family, they went through litigation to get $100. And I think there were 3 or 4 siblings. And then the grandkids, the great-grandkids. So it was nice to see that in Elaine, Arkansas, at least there was a reparation that the descendants could go to college for free. There was a way, the free tuition, to give back to, 200. Can you imagine? 200 people killed in one night. In one night. Colfax, Louisiana. I did not know about this one either. Colfax, Louisiana, 1873. This was a direct attack on black men getting the right to vote during Reconstruction. After whites contested the result of the 1872 election, sound familiar? I'm just saying. Black men and mostly black state militia holed up around the parish courthouse to protect the local government. On Easter Sunday, April the 13th, 1873, they were surrounded by a white mob that set the courthouse on fire and shot anyone who emerged. It was estimated that 62 of 81 African Americans were killed. We have really no idea because in most of these mass graves, there is no record. And with most African descent people, we can only go back so far. The records weren't kept a lot for, not all, but for a great deal of us. I'm sharing these things not to point fingers, not to make anyone feel bad, because this is our history. And I think it's important that we just acknowledge. For so long, there's been no acknowledgement that some of these things even happen, that this was a figment of someone's imagination. It's like the Holocaust. It amazes me when I hear people speak and say that it's not real. We, people, have been brutal to other people. So let us take this moment to go through a forgiveness process. As I said, when I thought about doing a forgiveness process, at first my ego got all in the way. I don't have nobody to forgive. Why I got to do a forgiveness process? But this includes all of us. And we, in this current time, some of our hearts have closed down. Our thinking has gone so awry with so much anger and hatred that we are reliving these massacres in this time right now. Because there's been no healing, there's been no forgiveness, there's been no awareness and recognition. So let us take this moment to just do a little forgiveness. Take your hand and put it over your heart. And realize that there's only one heart beating right here. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So in singing this song, recognizing that the forgiveness must first start with self. When I realized that the forgiveness for me showed up in ways that my ancestors fought so long and hard, and I took so much for granted. I didn't pick up the torch and continue on that road. I didn't stand for equality. I settled for this is all right. It's better than what it was. But I too, I have a job to do as well. And so when I realized, like, wow, I forgot that my mission here is to be this space of love that expands our consciousness in a way that we can see equality in every face, every culture, every sex, everywhere. And I hold that. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Maybe your mirror of reflection is the mob. We just have to call it. Maybe your ancestors were the mob. And your fear right now that someone is going to take something from you, that someone is going to change your life in a way that will make you less than. Place that. Let that go. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Maybe it's the fear and jealousy that the life you've lived, the people you have known, the places you've gone will be changed forever to something that will not reflect what you knew. And that is absolutely true. But why can't it expand into something greater, something bigger, something more? And perhaps you stood on the lines next, side by side, every person shouting for equality, marching there with Martin Luther King, sitting at the counter. And somewhere along the lines, you stopped paying attention to. You looked away and said, oh, we're good. Everything's all right. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Perhaps your thoughts sometimes are filled with fear of people that are of the same sex or a different sex or any kind of sexual expression. And you think that they're indecent and immoral. And you hold that energy in your spirit. And you see people and you think that they are not a descendant of God, that they are not one with all that is. And the hatred fills your heart in such a way that you think that you have to hold that hate in such a place to guard yourself. There's a light. There's a light. There's a light that says, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. What are you thankful for? You're thankful that they came and that they took that march. They stood on that bridge. They were lynched. They walked hand in hand and said, I am a woman and this is the woman that I love. They walked together. They spoke up. They spoke out and said, the world can be more. It can be greater. I am thankful for everyone that stood on that line that said we are more than what we are showing up to be. And right now, I am standing on that line saying we are more. And I thank you. I thank you for everyone that has come before. Those that gave of their life. We love to say they gave of their life for a cause, and I believe they gave of their life for greater expansion of life, for greater experience in life, for an equality of life that is magical and mystical for us all, if we could only trust. So as you're holding your heart, all of the ill thinking, the doubt, the worry, gently say to it, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for letting me know that I am caught in an illusion that is not the truth, that the power and the presence that is within me is greater than anything that I can fear. It is greater than any doubt. It is greater than the world. And the world that I'm choosing starts within me. Forgive me. I thank you. I love you. I love you. After all of this, I love you. I may not understand everything and definitely don't know everything, but I love you. And I can hold on to that light of love. That light of love is enough when I don't know which way to turn, when I don't know what to say, when I'm afraid that maybe I'm not enough, when I'm jealous that something or someone is greater than me, when I'm in fear. I can hold on to that glimmer of love. This is the love of God. And God is always loving. Always loving. So in this love, like the dove, release your heart. Let it rise and fly. Let it fill your spirit with hope and faith. Let each breath recognize that love can be more than enough. Love is enough. That we can love ourselves into such a blissful state that when we look out, we see the face of God in everyone and everywhere. And we can love. We can love a world that works for all. We can love equality. We can love when we don't know. We can love when we're yelling at the TV. We can love when we think our family members have lost their minds. What are you talking about? We can keep the light of love. As you hear yourself say, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Take the breath. Just take this moment and let the hum within your spirit, let it be. So I find myself not able to go forward right now. I just want to be in this space of love. And so I say to you, thank you for joining us on Kitchen Conversations tonight. We are Universal Spirit Center. We are a global community living consciously. We are a spiritual vibration awakening to all that is. I thank you for joining. Peace and blessings.